All right, let's talk about times when we've actually observed natural selection. So, there are a lot of evolution, like of humans, we can't really see. All we can do is look at the fossil record and we've tried to figure it out. But there are instances of natural selection that have happened in our lifetime that we can actually watch the evolution occur. So, what do you need? You kind of need animals that don't live as long. Like to watch humans evolve, you have to watch them like grow all the way to 30 and then they finally have babies and then you watch those babies develop to 30. But if you do something like fruit flies or moths that live a lot longer and reproduce at a much younger age, you can watch like several generation of moths happen in your lifetime or even like in a year. So that's where we've observed natural selection. We see a variation, some sort of difference, because you got to have differences, right? And then we see some sort of selecting agent. Remember, like something has to be an advantage and something has to be a disadvantage. So, one classic example is industrial melanism. So, that just means that we saw the colors of moths change over time due to the development of industrialization, which just means like we started industry, we started factories. So, there's these things called the peppered moths. And back in 1845, the most common moths, 80%, 4 out of 5 moths were the white peppered color and not the dark color. But then industrialization started like 1865, 1890. And what happened was we started pumping all this smoke out of factories. And now all of a sudden we have more black than white moths, and then even more, 4 out of 5 moths were black. Well, why did that happen? Think about it. So if you take a look at these pictures, you might figure it out. All right, so how many moths are in this picture? This is a picture, maybe, let's pretend it was from uh, early 1800s. So I definitely see this moth. There's also a moth here. And here's our little chickadee or our little bird that wants to eat the moths. Who's he going to choose first? Who's he going to see first? Who's he going to eat? Okay, so he is going to eat this one. So that means that back in 1845, when you have like a regular tree that kind of has just like white lichen on it or whitish green lichen on it, the black stood out and they got eaten a lot, and white really blended in nicely. They had nice camouflage, so that's why you had more of the white back then. Okay, now take a look at the trees after industrialization. So these are the trees nearby the factory. First of all, look at the color of the trees. They're all black. And now ask yourself, how many moths are in that picture? I see one, two. Oh, wait, there is a third. Okay, so now who stands out and who's going to get seen by the little chickadee bird, who is going to get eaten first? So these white ones are getting eaten, and the black is now at an advantage. So that one is going to be eaten more. Okay, so that's why over time, as the trees got blacker, right, with industrialization, with all the smoke from the factories, black became an advantage because black fit in better. When the trees were more light colored was better because they blended in more and they got eaten less. So we actually got to see in a lifetime, maybe not our lifetime, but in a matter of years that a person could live through, the black moths just took off and the light moths decreased. So we say that in this case, the variation was the color of the moths. You had 2 different colors, and first one was an advantage, then the other one was an advantage. And then the selecting agent, like who decided what's better? Who decided who lives and dies? Well, in this case, it's really the bird that sees it. What does the bird see better? What is the bird more likely to eat? The light ones or the dark ones? Another example of evolution that we've seen in our lifetime is that bacteria that can hurt us is actually developing a resistance to antibiotics. So, again, it's not that the little bacteria are like, oh, I think we've got this figured out. I know how to be resistant. Again, it's that you have a whole bunch of bacteria. Most can be killed by antibiotics, but a few have some sort of mutation or some genes that make them resistant. They live and they pass on that resistance gene. So that is what happens. So the variation is that most will be killed by antibiotics. Most of them will be killed, but some are going to have that mutation where they can survive. And if they are able to reproduce enough, now we have a whole bunch of bacteria that is resistant to antibiotics. And that could be a problem for us because we solve a lot of really basic problems with antibiotics, like even a urinary tract infection. We don't want someone dying from a urinary tract infection or a little infected cut because antibiotics no longer work. So the variation here is being resistant or not, and the selecting agent, the one that, so since it's the agent, we say that's really the thing that decides who lives and dies. Even if an antibiotic doesn't really decide and a bird doesn't really decide, they're still the like selecting agent. They're the ones that determine. They're the part of nature that selects. The antibiotic is determining who lives and dies. So it's wiping out all the bacteria that it's able to, but there's a few that are resistant that it's not able to, and they're the one that survive and pass on their genes. Another scary example of evolution is insects that are resistant to insecticides. So again, we spray a big field with insecticides, most of them die out, but some of them, by some genetic variation, you got to have change. You got to have someone who dies from it and someone who lives. Some of them are able to survive. They reproduce and they pass on their genes that are resistant to the pesticides. And now, over time, you have more and more that are resistant to insecticides. So again, the variation is being resistant or not, and the selecting agent, the thing that determines who lives and dies, is the insecticide. So just to sum up, there are several instances where we've seen evolution occur right before our eyes, which is further evidence that evolution is a real thing. And the few things that we saw in it were that you had to have variation. You had to have some that could survive and some that couldn't. You have to have some sort of selecting agent, which acts to like weed out to do survival of the fittest, to make some survive and some not survive. And over time, you can see actual gene frequency change. You can have maybe you still have the white moth gene, but the black one increases in frequency, or maybe it even becomes extinct. But either way, we've got evolution that we can see right before our eyes.